Hey, Mike Edwards here. Welcome everybody and anybody who may join us live or who may be watching us later. This is Empowered Until Further Notice, a video cast I started because I believe there's a lot of really great ideas and thoughts out there about trust and people and cultures in the workplace. And I'm bringing a guest in every week to talk about some of those. And today, I'm very fortunate to have my good friend Grace Heer here with me. Grace, welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited that you're here too. And I think we have a really important topic here. It's a little heavy in ways, and it's still really important. If we're not talking about this kind of topic, it leads to it has so many profound impacts that we probably don't want in the workplace or even in our lives.
Right.
So before we go there, though, Grace, why don't you take a minute and go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Mike. My name is Grace Heer. I live in Southern California in the Orange County area, and I am, I'm a professional cuddler. I'm a certified coach. I'm a neurolinguistic programmer. Neurolinguistic programming master practitioner. There it is, mouthful. I'm a human being who lives in the world and is navigating what that looks like.
Yeah, like every single one of us is.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I want to take you back to professional cuddler. I know what you mean by that, but I'm sure there's a whole bunch of people out there who just went, huh?
Yeah. So what I do as a cuddler is, yes, as a cuddler, but also with my work as a whole, I hold people. Yeah. And it's completely like the physical part is completely G-rated, Disney approved, grandmother approved. It's simply platonic touch. Yes. Providing nurture and care in a physical way that so I'll tell you this, what hurts my heart is that cuddling, that nurturing touch like that, these days as an adult, it's basically a prelude or a postlude to a more sexual experience.
Right.
And the reality is, you know how there's so much study about how babies need touch, babies need cuddling, babies need skin time. And the reality is that, Mike, you and I are just big babies.
Yes.
We all need it. We all need physical touch that is not sexual, that is platonic and nurturing and caring. And so I provide that for my clients. With my coach training, I also provide, like, I can hold your intention. I can hold you accountable. I can hold your wisdom for you.
Yeah.
So there's a whole lot of holding going on in my practice.
Yeah. Very cool. And man, after the last 2.5 years, don't we all crave more of that? Yeah, I know some people aren't huggers, but touch in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And I also work with clients who have perhaps are touch averse or have had touch trauma and are so allowing them to rebuild their boundaries and to create limits and to become more comfortable in their bodies again. So so my work is not just all about touch. Sometimes it's about not touch.
Right. Of course.
Sometimes it's about, and my one-on-one client sessions are all about, they're all led at the rate of the client. Yeah. So the client doesn't want, like sometimes a touch appointment will be, there will be very little touch actually involved, but lots of discussion about boundaries and like practicing yes and no, practicing saying, no, I don't want that. And practicing hearing no and celebrating it instead of taking it personally.
Right. Wow. Very powerful. Thank you for explaining that. And I think there could be some connection to where we're going to talk about grief, right? Because for me personally, I've missed being out in the world the last 2.5 years. Going to conferences and seeing friends and such where hugs happened. I'm a hugger. I love getting a hug and giving hugs. Yeah. So I do miss some of that, right? And I feel there's a sense of loss of connection as a result, right?
Yes.
So
I think that's one of the greatest. I mean, we could argue that one of the greatest, but one of the greatest losses that happened during COVID is the loss of touch, the loss of physical caring for one another.
Right.
Yeah, right. I happen to be a single person, and I do have a housemate, but I don't necessarily share hugs with her like I do with other friends and family members. And so living nearly alone during that time of isolation, boy, that was rough. Yeah. And I had to get really creative about how to get my social and my those kinds of needs met.
Yeah.
And even so, not all of my physical needs got met.
No, because without the touch. Yeah, absolutely. So let me take us into this a little bit further. So Grace sent me a couple articles kind of to set the stage for me and help align us on, okay, where are we going with this? And when we talk about grief and loss and mourning and, these really heavy subjects, what exactly are we talking about? Because quite often, I believe a lot of people think grief, somebody died, or a dog died, or whatever, but it's so much more. So I want to read a little bit. This is from a magazine called The Therapist. And it talks about emotional trauma, the levels of emotional trauma and secondary trauma that Americans, and I think probably the world, all of us have been exposed to since March 2020 are immeasurable. And untreated emotional trauma can be a catalyst for prolonged grief. Remember, trauma symptoms do not manifest after a single adverse effect in someone's life. They can also develop over time as the overexposed human psyche, stretched to its limit, becomes unable to process the devastating circumstances. I want to skip ahead a little bit here. The author does refer to a book called The Body Keeps Score. I've read it. Great book. Talks about trauma. Book. Yeah, highly recommend it.
Yeah.
And just skipping ahead here. So the already overwhelmed mind cannot handle it being the trauma, the grief, everything that's going on. Dr. Van der Kolk, I hope I got that right, continues, if an organism is stuck in survival mode, its energies are focused on fighting off enemies, not necessarily physical enemies, is my interpretation of that, which leaves no room for nurture, care, and love. And I know in many workplaces, we often don't talk about nurture, care, and love, but in the absence of those things can become toxic really quick. Creativity, this is my interpretation. Creativity can be impacted, innovation, morale, even should I even care about this?
Yeah, and productivity.
Yes.
Because I know, I began my journey into grief awareness with my own grief. My parents died 10 weeks apart. I was a mess. And it was, and so my desire is to open up the conversation, talk about grief. Let's prepare ourselves so that nobody else gets blindsided the way I was. So yes, it's important to talk about, to be aware of it as a leader, because we don't, wow, my brain just shut off. Ask me the question again, Mike.
No, you were riffing on the article there, but and I love where you're going. You're telling a story of well, I don't love that the story is what it is, but you were talking about the death of your parents and how that created a spark or a passion in you
Yeah.
that you want to do something about this
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
with grief out there.
Right. Yes. Yes. So just like sharing about what grief is, even like I was unprepared for the physical manifestations of grief. Like I was exhausted. I was tired all the time. I had this brain fog, like reading a menu and making a decision near impossible. I had like if I were at a restaurant and with people, I would say, can somebody just decide? You know what I like.
Yeah.
Choose something for me.
Yeah, I think that's
So
really
if I'm stuck like that in a restaurant, imagine me in the workplace, right?
Yes, exactly. Right. Where decisions can be way more complex than what do I want to have for lunch?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So so the more that we're aware of that and can work through the grief, the challenge, the fog, even even more physical, like it can be I had tremendous pain in my hips, and every time I went to my yoga class and we did the like hip openers,
Yes.
hip stretches, oh my goodness, the tears.
Yeah.
And my teacher, like the first couple of times she would come over, are you okay? You okay? And then like she got used to it. Just know I'm going to cry. It's all fine.
Yeah. Just let me be. Let me have it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me be with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you just said the magic words, Mike. Be with it. I think one of the questions that you had sent me was like, what's the impact if we're not with the grief?
Yes.
And the impact is we stuff it down and it gets worse.
Yeah.
And it gets more impactful and it gets stronger. And we're then not able to, the more we're not with it, the more it insists.
Yeah.
Like, so I can stop it here, but then it's going to keep pushing and pushing. And eventually it's going to push through. Yeah. And it's going to be worse than if I had just dealt with it in the moment.
Yeah. To let it go. It's that tension kind of thing. Is you got to let go of the tension early, or the pressure is going to build up and it's going to be far more, you may not explode, but it's going to be far more explosive or impactful.
Yes.
So when we talk about being with grief, right, because you were just talking about the impact of what if we don't be with it? What if we can't be with it? When we say can't be with grief, to me, I think what we're talking about is I'm in denial about it, or I'm in an environment where I can't talk about it.
Yeah.
Right, which I've seen in many workplaces. Right. Oh,
yes.
Grace, I'm really sorry for your loss. I guess it's time to get back to work now.
Yes, exactly. One of the social workers, when we were signing my mom into hospice, one of the social workers said, we live in a 3-day society. And she went on and said, our workplaces, our businesses, our employers give us, when someone dies, we get 3 days of bereavement.
Right.
And then you're expected to come back to work and be fine. And that's not the reality. No. That's not the reality. And so like, I noticed that we are talking a lot about grief from death.
Yes.
But if we wanted to even translate that into grief in the workplace, something, say you applied for promotion, you didn't get it, one of your coworkers did, or they hired someone from outside, there's going to be grief around that. There's going to be a sense of loss, and we need to mourn that actively, so that and maybe we mourn that in the work. Maybe there's a trusted coworker or leader that we can have that conversation with.
Yeah.
But because then if we don't acknowledge, I'm really disappointed I didn't get that, and maybe ask for feedback, but maybe just take the moments to mourn it. to
Yeah.
talk about. I would, I because I didn't get that, now I feel disempowered. I feel whatever I feel about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Then like if we don't mourn that, then it could come out in other like uglier ways, like especially if it was a promotion to a like a leadership role, and now I'm working under the person that got the job instead of me.
Yes.
Oh, that can, if I don't like take the time to be with my own grief about it,
Yes.
then that can take us, that could manifest as, what's the word? Yeah, I wanted more professional words, but like being snarky, being
Oh, yeah.
hateful, being unkind, insubordinate
Yes.
to that leader,
Yes.
undermining the leader in other ways. And that's not good for the workplace either.
No, and simply because we weren't given the space, time, or courtesy, or whatever you want to call it, to be able to grieve it and mourn it.
Yeah.
Let me just pause here for a second. You brought in the word mourn now. So let's talk about the difference just momentarily. Definition of grief versus mourning.
I love that. So grief is what we think and feel on the inside when we have an experience of loss. It might be fear, anger, panic, pain, whatever it is, emptiness, anxiety. So like the inside things. Mourning is the outward expression of our grief. So when we mourn, it's whether it's a ritual or not. So for example, it might be, in the case of loss to death, it might be the memorial service. It might be scattering the ashes. It might be being at the gravesite. It might be celebrating the life of that person by eating their favorite ice cream, whatever it might be wearing, in the old days, we used to wear black.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
In the old days. I sound like my grandpa. Back in my day, you could tell someone was mourning because they were wearing all black, or they had a black armband. Yeah. And so you would give those people a little extra compassion, a little extra grace, because, they're in mourning.
Yeah.
And we would allow that space for a human being to be with their feelings and be understanding if, they're not operating up to 100%, or they're not, they're experiencing pain or anxiety, or maybe they're lashing out. Like,
right.
If I had been wearing a black armband when I when I was grocery shopping and started bawling in the cereal aisle because there's daddy's favorite cereal, people would understand, black armband,
She's mourning, give her space, she's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't need to fix something, kind of stuff. Yes. So by that definition, then, when leaders help their people deal with grief, what they're in fact doing is helping them mourn.
Yes.
Right? And because of that, they normalize and allow them to be with their grief.
Yes. I love that. Normalizing grief and normalizing being with it. Can I tell a story?
Oh, please do.
So I have, this is actually probably answering the next question, but it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
So it was the 1-year anniversary of my mom's passing. Mm-hmm. And I went to work that day, not really understanding that it might be a difficult day emotionally for me. Yeah. And I had a check-in with one of my leaders, and she was fairly new to the team. And so she didn't know me terribly well. And I went in and sat down, and she asked, "How are you today, Grace?" And I started to cry. And I, "I'm sorry. It's my mom's anniversary. I didn't know this was going to happen." And she said, "Grace, no problem. why don't you tell me about your mom? And so she allowed me the space to be with my feelings and to celebrate my mom, and to really and to be on. I felt honored, and I really felt seen. And that moment was a pivotal moment in our relationship.
Mm.
So, and then like that also gave her opened up her understanding of me in the time that, since because she joined the team in the midst of my grief period.
Yeah.
So she didn't know me before, when I was, a little more vibrant, a little more energetic, a little more. And so like, oh, okay. So well, and then like that she allowed me to take time in my check-in to celebrate my mom. That was that was a tremendous leadership moment for me. She met me where I was, which is kind of in a pit. And
Yes.
she sat with me and allowed me to celebrate what had been.
Yeah, I love that. And you're right. Like, this is kind of taking us where we want to go here, is how do we support each other? Whether you're a peer or subordinate, or even the other way around, leaders need support too.
For
right?
sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what I'm hearing is one big support mechanism is just allowing people to acknowledge or celebrate or talk about, like, give them space for whatever needs.
Yeah.
In that case, tell me about your mom.
Yeah.
Right. I could think in a case of somebody's grieving some loss related to COVID, not necessarily a death.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I've seen plenty of those people over the last 2.5 years, right, where they're struggling with something. It's just giving them space to acknowledge, what they've lost.
Yeah.
And right, like, make it real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without saying, you'll get past this.
Yeah, you're fine, or it's okay, or yeah. Those placating things, like I think some people think that they're being helpful, but what they're really doing is shoving the emotion down. And so that means that I have to hold it back. And it's one more thing that I have to hold back, and one more thing that I have to hold back.
Yes.
Instead of and I acknowledge that not every moment can be a moment that like can be that kind of let's give you time. There are deadlines and there are things that must be done.
Yes.
And here's something that I've learned, is that if we allow, even if we say, like when it's an NLP trick, that I have conversations with my unconscious mind.
Yes.
And I will say, look, mind, I can't do that right now, but I promise that when we get home, or, I will have some time to deal with this grief, but it can't be right now. Can we just pull it together right now? And then at X time, but then you have to follow up and make sure that at X time you give yourself the time to grieve.
Yeah.
Whether
it's giving myself or giving someone else a promise.
Exactly.
Do not ever fail to follow through.
Yes. So that's what I was going to offer, is that when, if it's one of those moments where there's a deadline, or there's a client around the corner, or something where we need to pull it together, say, look, I know it's really rough right now. Can we focus now? And then at 2:00, you and I will go off into the conference room together alone, and we'll have time to process this together.
Exactly.
Beautiful, beautiful way to manage the business and support your teammate.
Yeah, no question. Yeah, and these things to me don't have to be big. They don't have to be hours and hours of talking. It could become that. Who knows?
Right.
Right. I'm thinking of a time, this is going back quite a few years, and our family dog had died. And that night we were playing in a concert with the band we were a part of, concert band we were a part of. And so I'm at the back. I was a percussionist.
Of course.
A very dear friend. Yeah, of course. a very dear friend, another percussionist came in, and yeah, I was just working on holding it together.
Right.
And she just put a hand on my shoulder at one point and said, "I've got you."
Nice.
Or "I'm here for you," or whatever exactly she said.
Yeah.
Boom, instant feeling of support. You know, without having to talk about anything. We couldn't anyway. We're in the middle of a concert, but
Right.
that's all it took.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And
so small.
Just those moments, because one of the things that grief can do to us is we feel isolated. No one's ever felt this way. No one can understand how I feel. And it's true, no one can understand exactly how I feel. But there are people in our circles who can support us,
Absolutely.
who can be with us. And even just that moment of hand on the back, a kind word, okay, I'm not alone. I can do this.
Yeah. So we've been talking a lot about the grief that's related to death.
Mm-hmm.
Just before we bring this to a close, I thought, let's just make a good connection to other things like climate change. What's going on with climate change and the pandemic, or let's call it COVID. You never really know with politics if the pandemic's still a thing. Or the war in Ukraine and so on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I believe people are out there and they're watching in social media. They may not even be getting good information, but it's having an impact. It's creating a loss in ways, right?
Yes.
And is that any different when it comes to grief in your mind? Is it any different when it comes to it showing up in the workplace?
Well, honestly, grief is grief. And we never know how someone is reacting to any situation in the world. So, and one person may be like, I have a coworker who is of Ukrainian descent.
Mm-hmm.
And so, being aware that it's affecting her differently than it might be affecting other people.
Yes.
So it's like, so no, there's no there. Like, my answer is grief is grief.
Yeah. Grief is grief. Mourning is mourning.
Yeah.
The only question is, what's the loss we're grieving?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's true.
There are major losses and there are smaller losses.
Yeah.
And there, big situation like in the with the war in Ukraine. For some, it's a big deal. It's a large situation. Maybe they still have family back in Ukraine, but for some people, the war in Ukraine might be much less significant, I could say.
Yeah.
So yeah, even the same thing can it just but grief is grief.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really important for leaders and teams and peers to pay attention to and trust what you're feeling about what's happening. For example, I'm thinking of a leadership team. It happened to be the day after the Uvalde shooting down in Texas.
Yeah.
And we got into the meeting. I didn't know what to expect in terms of emotion. Mm-hmm. But it was so obvious emotionally. The space was so different than what it normally is.
Yeah. And
they wanted to dive into the topic. And I went, whoa, wait a sec. How's everybody doing this morning? I didn't bring up the shooting. I just asked. Right. And it opened up about a 5-minute conversation, mm-hmm. which allowed them to mourn how they were feeling.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. You don't got to be an expert. You don't got to be anything. Mm-mm. Just pay attention to what you think might be happening.
Yes. And you just got to show up and be human.
That's all.
Like, because humans are experts. Like, I'm an expert on me and you're an expert on you. And so, but if someone gives me the opportunity, the moment, hey, how are you? and really gives me the opportunity to, then now I get to assess, how am I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that. So, as we're coming towards the close in this call, what do you want people to take away from this?
Like, don't be afraid of grief. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of any of your feelings. Learning, I feel like learning to be, or being with our feelings is something that we have sort of over the past year, like for a long time, it wasn't okay. Feelings were not okay.
Yes.
And so in the past few years, we're opening it up. We're allowing that, okay, emotions are okay. And we get to be human and we get to have our emotions. But I do think that in the workplace, there's a lot of fear of emotions. And so, like, let your people, so I'm speaking to the leaders, let your people feel and allow them space.
Yeah. I love that. You're making me think one of my favorite phrases, I wish I never had to use it, but one of my most common phrases I'll say in those moments are, it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
Right? Let them feel it. Let them not be okay.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, how can people get in contact with you if they want to hear more?
Well, that's a great question. You can find me at gracefulcuddles.com, and there you'll learn about, I don't have any upcoming events in this moment, but you can learn about me. You can contact me through the website. I do offer a grief to relief checklist. Mm-hmm. So these are some ways that you can take good care of yourself in order to manage your grief journey.
Right. Is that available on the website?
It is.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
gracefulcuddles.com.
Yeah.
Cool. Cute, right? My name's Grace. Anyway.
Well, didn't that work out well?
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Grace, thank you so much. Just for what can be a really heavy topic. This was so informative, and I loved having this discussion with you. I like talking to you anytime, but
well, I'm so glad, and I hope that folks are getting good good information and good and I'm absolutely happy to hear feedback. Yeah. So please, share comments, and I'll check out and respond to comments or questions in the comments later if you like.
Awesome. Please do. I will too. Thank you so much. And for everybody who's listening, coming up next week on Tuesday, July 26th at 4 p.m. Eastern, I have my good friend Lisa Hare, another leadership coach. Yep.
Awesome.
A good friend of Grace too, if you couldn't tell.
I'm gonna have to tune in for that conversation.
Awesome. Please do. And that's it for today. So thanks again, Grace. Thank you, everyone who's was watching or will be watching us. And I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.